Hello, welcome to the show. This is HackHunter, where we review some of the best and worst tattoo artists. Now, in this episode, we're going to switch it up a little bit, guys, because we had an artist that wrote into us requesting if we would review some of his work, give him any advice that we could. And so this is something that I've always wanted to do, look forward to doing. So for any of you out there, any apprentices or artists that have been just starting their career, you want a little bit of help or you want to see what I think of your portfolio, definitely write in, and I'll do my best to help out. But for today, we're going to be talking about this gentleman. Enter Greg Lamport. Now, he wrote in all the way from the UK. That's right, he's at Union Ink in Aldershot, UK. And so I was happy to do a review because a lot of times when we get requests from artists, it's just artists that want some more clout. They want us to do a review on them just to kind of promote them. But in this case, I know that we don't get very many viewers from the UK, so I know that George had the right intention. George, Union Ink on Instagram. Definitely go check him out for yourself. Union Ink only has maybe one or two artists. There's only, I think they're just starting out there, so they don't have a ton of artists, but I definitely would recommend checking them out for yourself. Always do your own research, guys, but let me show you what I think of his work. Oh, okay, so I'm starting with the worst first, and I'll be honest, guys, this one was a little bit older. It was a little ways back in his portfolio, so, you know, he's, like I said, he's just starting out. He's been tattooing for about 2 years now, and this was probably, I think, about 6 months ago or so, maybe a year ago that he did this piece, and obviously, you know, the design work is a little bit lacking. I see some squiggles in the lines, and I see that the skin might have been a little overworked on the color, because you can see the green looks a little bit patchy there, so I'd recommend, you know, George, just slow it down with your color. You really, when you start out, you have to figure out the balance between the speed of your machine and the speed of your hand technique, right? Is your hand whipping and moving too fast, or is your machine possibly too slow and your hand's working too fast, or vice versa? Either way, it doesn't work out. You have to find the equilibrium between how fast your machine is poking those holes and how fast you're progressing with your hand technique. So very important, slow it down. Here's another color piece, but this one was one of the newer ones in his portfolio, right? So I felt a little better about judging it. I looked at this wing and I see, you know, the consistency of lines looks pretty good. The shading doesn't come up to the line in some places, but this sort of shading over a large area is difficult to keep it smooth and consistent, so it's something that I would expect to see somebody just starting out or learning. I would expect to see that. I see kind of missed some black here. I don't know if that was accidental, but the blending from black to brown is a little bit lacking, so this definitely looks rushed to me, especially when I don't see the color getting all the way up to the line in these areas. That's a simple little mistake that you can avoid by just not rushing, which is hard. You get a large piece like this, you want to get it done, you want to show it off, I get it. But then when I zoom to this wing, there's some errors galore here. Yeah, you can see the consistency is out the window here with this one. Again, the color's not getting up to the line in those places. And then there was this feather right here. Why does this feather not have an outline, George? Why do they all have outlines except for that one? Little odd, little strange. And I know that this is probably a second or third sitting on this one. You probably outlined it first and you came back. And so we're seeing how some of the outlines healed, and it looks like you overworked some of them here, right? So again, you got to slow it down, especially around stretchy areas like the armpit. You really have to have your machine at a 90-degree angle, especially if you're using a bold outliner that has a large needle grouping. You got to be at that 90 degrees, perpendicular to the skin, because otherwise you're only hitting with a few of those needles on the edge, and that's why you might get some of the scraggliness here, right? You got to be at that perfect 90 degrees, and they'll all come out smooth and consistent. So that's something that I'm sure your mentor probably went through it with you. That's one of the first things we tell people when you're first learning, is that 90-degree angle when you're outlining. And eventually you go on and you learn where you can break the rules and where you can bend the rules and where you can kind of reinvent the wheel for yourself. But in the beginning, you got to learn those fundamentals and you got to stick with them. So yeah, this one looks a little bit better because look at this line on her chin here, a lot smoother, a lot more consistent there. That's great. Some of these smaller lines, as I'm sure you've learned, the thinner the line weight, the more these shakes show. So you got to get confident with them. The best advice I can give to reduce those shakes is to always pull your needles towards your body, right? Because if you're pulling those lines towards your body, you're using a lot more muscles in your arms and your shoulders, everything. You're pulling it with a lot more muscles so you get more stability. Whereas if you're trying to push away from yourself, you're usually just using the muscles in your fingers or your small muscles in your wrist, and it leads to this sort of shaking. So always pull these long lines. Prepare for a long line. Don't just pull a little bit and then pull another one and then pull another one. Really practice doing those long smooth lines all in one shot. That's the ideal here. But the main thing that I see wrong here is actually the shading. If I zoom in here, this chop effect you got, this is again really common with artists starting out. When they're rushing, they want to get through it. A lot of times you might see videos online like this where an artist is teaching people how to tattoo and they're rushing, they're zipping through it like this and it's coming out beautifully. And that's all good for them because they've been doing this a long time. They've refined their technique, the muscle memory, everything. They know how they can get in there and whip that shading out real fast. For artists starting out, do not try to imitate that when you see that. And this is another reason why you really want to have an apprenticeship with a mentor, because they're going to guide you in that aspect. They're not going to let you just kind of whip through things. They're going to show you what you're doing wrong, tell you to slow down. And so another thing I see is that you went really light with the light shading. This is really common again for artists just starting out. You want to go really light with that shading because it's hard to draw out light shading really far. It's really hard to do that. And again, it's an advanced technique. It takes time to learn, it takes patience to apply it, and so I could tell you kind of wanted to go just a little bit to begin with, just to be safe, and you know, the more you go, the more comfortable you'll get with that large areas of shading. Here's an example of it where, yeah, you brought out that light shading. I could tell you're whipping it out quick, so you get a little bit more irritated skin. But, yeah, you'll slowly get there. You'll slowly get there. The lines in this look very smooth, so I'd definitely give you kudos on that. And some of these leaves, these black leaves, I can see the black line is a lot darker than the black that fill in, okay? So a lot of artists struggle with this. Even veterans struggle with this. But for some reason, your needle is saturating more black than your filler. So a lot of times the best way to correct this, just slow down. You want to make these tight little circles and advance slowly, right? Fast, tight circles and advance slowly. And again, you can refine that technique. You can move on from there, adapt it yourself. But in the beginning of your tattoo career, you want to really perfect those fundamentals. And that's a really kind of genuine or general fundamental that everybody starts with, is those tight little circles. And it creates a patience in you. You got to have that patience to apply things properly. If you're rushing things, that's where the mistakes come in. Now, throughout your portfolio, I saw a lot of kind of different styles. It was hard to kind of nail down what your style is or what your preferred style is. I saw mostly kind of traditional style work, and it didn't look bad, especially when you're doing nice, smooth, bold outlining. It didn't look bad. One thing I would veer away from is repeating yourself, where I see these kind of flowers with the line break, or with the color... I'm sorry, with the skin breaks. I saw them again and again, these same ones, and then these just kind of single color leaves, and then I saw it again here. So switch it up, okay? You know, every piece, if you're not sure how to create a new design or you can't think of it, you know, it's not a bad idea to look at other artists' artwork, see how they've done it, get some ideas. It's not all about just copying them or stealing ideas, but getting ideas from other artists makes our industry go round, okay? So don't feel bad if you want to take some new ideas and get some new techniques and styles to add to your repertoire. Another thing I would keep in mind when you're doing skin breaks, are usually meant for a purpose. You don't just leave it empty for no reason. You leave it empty not only to create a 3D effect, but to usually differentiate it from the background. But if your background is also a skin break, then it kind of blurs together, right? The skin tone here and the skin tone here. So you probably should have brought out the color a little bit more in this gem here in the backdrop. But it's a pretty small gripe. This overall looks like a relatively clean piece. I can tell the color, again, a little bit overworked. So you got to find that happy medium between overworking the skin and working it just enough. The animal portrait kind of stuff, I would say, is definitely not your forte. Give it some time, man. I don't think you're quite there yet, right? And that's okay. There's no rush. This was probably the best one I saw, but you still outline the eyes, which is, you know, definitely not a realism technique, outlining the teeth. There's different ways of doing those, and you really want to work with another artist that has experience in those. And also, outlining the white at the very end there. I know it seems like the easy way to do it, and it is, but that white is not going to stay. You can't add white to black and gray and hope that the white will overpower it. It just won't. When that heals, it'll disappear. So these ones, since you didn't go over the black and gray, these ones will probably stay, but like this one here, probably not going to stay. But overall, this was your best one. And then I wanted to kind of end it on this one because I thought this one was pretty good. I can tell the line work's getting smoother, more confident, and so I think you're right where you're supposed to be. I know you said you're about 2 years in, a little bit more, and I think a lot of artists or people watching might say, well, geez, 2 years in, that's a lot. Like, he should be way better by now. I would have done better at 2 years, and trust me, you wouldn't. It took me probably about 5 years before I stopped being nervous when I tattoo, and that's God's honest truth. It took me forever to find that confidence and to find that security in what I was doing. And a big part of it, and this goes to you, George, is find the style that you want to do. You jump around a lot in your portfolio, you know, trying to do American traditional and then realism stuff. You stop jumping around. Stick to what you know you're good at. And this kind of thing is what you're good at. You just got to figure out how to blend these colors better without overworking the skin, and then you'll be great. But overall, I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be in your career. And so, you know, don't let it discourage you. Keep learning. Get around as many good artists as you can. And obviously, you go on the hack list. No, I'm just kidding, George. I wouldn't put you on the hack list, man. I'm just kidding. Thanks so much for writing in, man. I'm happy to give any advice to anybody just starting out. Anybody else watching, feel free to send in any reviews. And guys, let him know down in the comments what you think of his artwork, all right? Otherwise, until then, George, keep learning. All right, we'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye-bye.